Okay. Yeah, last time we had some disturbance. Okay, I will
When I heard the word
make
mute,
you
I knew Nirmala was also on the session because she always reminds you to mute and record.
right.
I have a
I have made
weakness.
her.
I have a
No, no, no. It's
weakness.
a good thing. It's not a
No,
weakness.
but my weakness is I get disturbed quickly with if there is some other sound.
No, but still, others also get disturbed. It's nice to
Yeah.
point out. Hmm.
Okay, I'm a mute,
Yeah,
making
yeah,
everybody
yeah,
mute.
yeah.
Okay, and I made Nirmala co-host, so she can also manage. Hmm. So today's session number 23, and we are going to discuss verse number 22. Okay, so we will have a revision later on. First, let us finish, let us discuss verse number 22. I am just revising the verses which we discussed in the last two sessions. So, verse 20 was when the ego is destroyed, the self, which is supreme infinite existence, shines forth of its own independently as I. So, what does this mean? Like we discussed about uh, how we have this false ego. So there is Brahman, which is existence, consciousness, and bliss. And then we have this body, mind, and intellect, and whose attributes are inert, finite, decaying, and dying. So when they come together, the ego comes into being and it borrows some properties from Brahman and some properties from body, mind, intellect. So existence, consciousness, it borrows from Brahman. The remaining, like inert, being inert, finite, decaying, and dying, it borrows from body, mind, intellect. And because of all these constraints, all these limitations, and the fear of decaying and dying, its basic nature is sorrow. So this is the ego. And in today's session, we are going to discuss the entire process as to how the ego comes into being. So when we inquire into the mind and inquire into the aham thought, this ego disappears, and so the all the problems that we face in our life, we feel that we are facing those problems, but all those problems are of ego. And once the ego is destroyed, the entity having the problem is dissolved, and our higher nature or our true nature shines forth. And that is this big I. Then in verse number 21, we discussed following the merger of the individual I, that is pure consciousness, individual I, which is like small I, the ego, the total I also merges, and this which is known as true I shines due to its indestructible nature. So this verse introduced the third I. So far we have been talking about the Jiva, which is the small I or the ego, and the total I, and real I, the absolute I, which is consciousness, existence, consciousness. And this verse, we got introduced to this third I, which is total I, which is the totality of all. So we have the Jiva, which is our lower nature, that is, which is an illusion, this body, mind, intellect. And the Jiva itself is an illusion. And and seems like we consider ourselves to be body, mind, intellect, that is, we are identified with our lower nature. When we see outside, even the lower nature of world is what we focus on. And this lower nature of the world is made up of name and form. And like my body, mind, intellect, it is also limited and finite. And we experience all these limitations. So there is sorrow. There is also fear of like myself, and there are so many millions or billions of objects and beings in this world. So it creates a fear. And because of this feeling of being unfulfilled, we have lot of desires for this world, and we keep performing actions to get this happiness in the hope that I will get fulfilled, but that never happens. The happiness that we gain out of these actions is very limited, and it lasts for a very short period. So we continue to perform actions one after the other in the hope that finally I will get fulfilled, but that doesn't happen. And in fact, because of this chain of actions, we get deeper and deeper into the bondage. So, by doing all the sadhanas and by contemplation and by inquiring into the nature of the mind, and also by inquiring this aham thought, we realize our higher nature, which is Satchit Ananda, consciousness, self, or Brahman. And once that happens, like we are no longer identified with our lower nature. So there are no constraints, no limitations at all. So again, like when we look at the world, instead of focusing on the lower nature of the world, we also realize that world is also nothing but Brahman. It's a manifestation of Brahman. So there is no more world. We realize that world is also an illusion, and the self in me is the self in all. There are no more limitations, so there is no more sorrow, there is no more fear. And since I realize that I am fulfilled, I am happiness myself, there are no more desires for the world, there are no more actions, and we get liberated from this cycle of birth and death, and also from the sorrows of this world. So, this is what we discussed in the last session. And what are these three eyes? The first eye, the smallest eye, I can say, is identified with body, mind, intellect, which is nothing but jiva or the ego. And I also realize that world is nothing but the manifestation of Brahman, manifestation of existence consciousness, and there has to be an entity which creates, sustains, and transforms this world. And this I, which is identified with the totality of the world, is defined as Ishvara, and absolute reality or I, that is substratum or Brahman, we already know. So, what the verse which we discussed in the last session, it tells us that there are three eyes, and once I realize that the smallest eye, the ego, is only an illusion, there is no reality to it, I also realize that the I identified with the totality or the Ishvara, that is also that the entire world also, I realize that it is only an illusion. And this is also like related to the three philosophies about life in Vedanta. The first one, that is Dvaita, myself and God are two different entities. That is Dvaita philosophy propagated by Madhavacharya. Then there is another which is called Vishishta Advaita, where I consider myself to be part of God, which is Vishishta Advaita, propagated by Ramanuja. And then the third one, which is Advaita, like my higher nature and Bhagwan's higher nature is same. So in effect, I am God, Advaita. There is only one, and that is propagated by Shankara. Okay, actually, we will not get into these details like last time. Bhagavad Gita verses. We will discuss verse number 22 today. So let me chant this. Okay, I'll just read the introduction. It was said in verse 19 that ego is destroyed. Describe how such an inquiry is to be conducted. विग्रहेन्द्रिय प्राणधीतमः नाहमेक तज्जडं यसत्. So some of these Sanskrit words, aham, we have been using, like we have seen this in earlier verses also, which is I. And in different contexts, it means different things. Like when we talk about jiva, it is only a thought, aham thought. Ekasat, I, the one existence. Whereas this one is talking about the absolute reality I. And sorry. And it na vigraha indriya. It is not the body senses. So this high, which is vital air, dhi is the intellect, and tama is ignorance. Tata jadam hyasat. It is inert. Hyasat. And that's why it is, and it is also non-existent. So this is the meaning of the verse. I am the one existence and not the body, senses, vital airs, intellect, and ignorance, as all these are inert and indeed non-existent. Okay, so we will read the commentary. We will not read the entire commentary. Okay, we will keep pausing. Okay. Yeah, Chanda, can you please read? Hello. Okay, I don't know whether she's there. Yeah, Umaji, you have the book. Can you read?
Yeah, I can read.
Yeah, please.
Uh, The, the instruction in Vedanta is first to think over the notions we maintain about the self and then see if it is true or false. The same system of inquiry is followed here. When asked to introduce ourselves, we first say our name. The name surely cannot be me. It only indicates me. It is given to me to distinguish me from other beings and things. Taking myself to be the body, I introduce myself as the son of so and so, father of so and so, aged X years, and weighing Y pounds. Should I continue?
I'll just briefly explain. Yeah, we have already seen that this aham thought is nothing but my understanding about myself. And how does this understanding come in, on what basis this aham thought or my understanding about myself is developed? It is based on superficial analysis of my experience. And I start with like name and form, and then like it is body. Yeah, please continue. Yeah.
Is this belief that I am the body true? If I am the body, then which body am I? Since childhood, I have changed many bodies. Every single cell of my body has perished and has been replaced several times. The childhood body is unrecognizably different from the youth body and indescribably different from the old dilapidated me. With the continuous perishing of the body, I do not perish. If I am the body, I would have perished many times over, and I would therefore not be presently available to remember the different changes in the body. The knower of the changes is in the body is clearly different from the body. I am ever present in and through the changes of the body.
Yeah, just read the next two paragraphs first. Yeah.
Secondly, the body is made up of five great elements: space, air, fire, water, and earth, and is therefore inert. Being inert, it cannot know itself or anything else. But I know objects and me, and I am therefore sentient. The body has the sentiency of its own. Strange that I think of myself as the gross inert body. For objects outside my body, I have the discrimination that I am the knower of the objects and therefore different from the objects. I know that I am not the book I perceive. The same discrimination deserts me when it comes to the body which I perceive, just like I perceive the book. This lack of thinking is the cause of our sorrow. When I identified with the body, it is natural that the modifications of the body, like growth or decay, are thought to be my modifications. The pain of the head is my headache.
So this talks about body, and like what it discusses is I am sentient being and my body is inert. That is the one reason like I cannot be the body. Also, the body keeps changing all the time. The cells in the body like keep dying and they are replaced by new cells. The other thing is like when I look at the objects, I am very clear that I am not any of these objects because whatever I perceive is not me. So if we apply the same logic, if I apply the same logic, then since I am able to perceive, I am able to feel the body, I am also not the body. And okay, the next paragraph talks about the sense organs. Let's just read that. Yeah. Yeah, Umaji.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The same logic applies in the case of the sense organs of perception and action, Jnanendriya and Karmendriya, the vital air, prana, the mind intellect, dhi, and ignorance, tama. When the eye cannot see, I say I am blind. Hunger and thirst are the characteristics of the vital airs, but I say I am hungry. When the mind is peaceful or agitated, I say I am peaceful or agitated. When the intellect gains knowledge of medicine, I say I am a doctor. Even before I gained knowledge of medicine, I was present. At the same time, I said, I know that I am ignorant of medicine.
Okay, so one it is talking about like pranas, like because these are physiological functions, and because of this, like we feel thirsty, we feel hungry. Then there is a mind, and there are all the time thoughts in this mind, and we are able to experience like we are able to perceive these feelings or emotions in the mind that I am happy, I am sad, I am angry. So this is like continuation of the logic of whatever I perceive, I am not. So if I am able to perceive these emotions of being sad, angry, etc., that means I am able to perceive my thoughts and my mind. So I am not even the mind. And it is also talking about the intellect, like the knowledge that we gained, and we perceive that the knowledge we gained is that because of that I have now acquired some position, and that's why all these are apart from me, and I cannot be all these entities. I cannot be body, I cannot be mind. I cannot be in my intellect. Okay. So I think there is a lot of discussion about this ego, and basic thing about this discussion is about ego. And but what we will discuss today is the process by which this ego comes into being. Because like we have discussed that this ego is a false entity, it's only an illusion, and only when we inquire into this entity, that entity gets destroyed. So if we have to just a moment.
There's no audio.
Just a moment. OTP. Okay. Somebody at the door. Okay. So what we will do is we will first see how this ego comes into the being. Okay. So in order to understand that, we need to understand these two theories. One is superimposition theory, and the superimposition theory is about two entities, or maybe we can say two objects. But since we are going to, object means only the gross things, whereas we are going to apply this theory for entities which may not be gross. So I will just call it as entity. So superimposition of entity A on entity B. When two entities are in close theory, we understand this with examples. One is crystal and cloth. So we all know that there are crystals, and this crystal is actually colorless. So as far as attribute of the crystal is considered, it is colorless. But when it is kept on a cloth, colored cloth, like if the cloth is red, then crystal appears to be red. So actually red color is not the attribute of crystal. It is the attribute of the cloth. But the property of this cloth, that is color red, appears to be that of a crystal. The other example is iron rod, which is put in a fire. So we all know that iron, the properties of iron is it is cold and it is black in color. Whereas the attributes of fire, it is yellow and it is very, very hot. So when they come together, that is an iron rod is put into the fire, what we see is a ball of iron which is like hot, and it is bright and it is yellow. Like state also is molten state, whereas iron by when iron rod and fire are brought together, it appears that iron rod has now turned into yellow and it is hot and it is molten. So this is what is the superimposition theory. And just remember this right now, and we will discuss another theory which is called identification theory. So here again, there are two entities, and the theory says that when entity A identifies with entity B, A goes through the experiences of entity B, and A also experiences the feelings and emotions of B. Now again, we will understand this with the help of example. The one example is mother and child. We all know that mother is strongly identified with the child, and all the time thinking about the child, and that is what is identification. So suppose the child is studying in school and is about to appear for the exam, and the child is anxious, and so is the mother. And like in today's this thing, sometimes the child is not worried, but mother is so anxious, and that feeling of anxiousness is because of the identification with the child. Suppose the child passes the exam with flying colors and the child is happy, so is the mother. So that is what happens when there is strong identification between two entities, in this case, mother and a child. This identification also happens when in sports, that is, when we are watching a live telecast of any sports. And since cricket is most popular, let us take the example of cricket. So suppose we are watching a match between India and Pakistan, and naturally, like we get identified with the Indian team, and when the match is on, like any incidents like affects our emotions also. It affects the emotions of the player, like suppose the catch is dropped or like somebody gets run out, like whatever emotions the team feels, we, even though we are just watching the match on television, we also experience the same emotions. When the team wins, the players are very happy, elated, and same happens to us. Actually, we are just sitting in the comforts of our home and watching the match on TV. But by being identified with this cricket team, we also experience the same emotions. And example which we are going to discuss in detail is that of a movie. And okay, let us like try to understand like how we enjoy the movie or like we experience the emotions in a movie. So the first thing that happens like when we enter a movie theater, the what we realize is there is pitch darkness, and that is the prerequisite of any movie when we watch that movie. So when we enter the movie theater, there is pitch darkness, and when the movie starts, the first thing that happens is we as a movie watcher forget about ourselves. Like consider somebody who's having lot of problems at home, but when he's watching the movie, when there is darkness and the movie starts, the first thing that happens is the watcher forgets himself about all his problems or all his emotions that were there before entering the theater. And then what happens as the movie unfolds, because of that screenplay, it is designed in such a way that you get identified with one of the characters of the movie. And most of the times it is the hero of the movie you get identified. So as the movie progresses, like consider a case where like we go through like the movie is about starts from the childhood of that hero and then progresses. So suppose the hero of the film, he had a very bad childhood. Then when we are watching those childhood things, childhood incidences, we also go through the same emotions. We also feel the sorrow and the pain of that hero. And as the movie progresses, maybe that hero does well in life and the emotions change. He is happy, he is successful, and we also experience the same feelings. And the kind of emotions or the uh, like the strength of that emotions or how strongly we experience those emotions depends upon this identification. Stronger the identification, stronger are the emotions. And what actually is happening here, as I said, like we forget about ourselves, about the problems or the life situation that we are in. And when this happens, actually another fictitious entity comes into being, which is neither me nor that movie, that actor. It is a fictitious entity which when while watching the movie experiences different kind of emotions which are not at all related to my situation in life. And that's why this is a fictitious entity which doesn't have the problems that I am facing in life, has nothing to do with my lifestyle or the things, the events that I am going through my life. It is these emotions are created by the events and happenings that are there in the life of that hero. We will try to understand this like okay. And this happens because of these two theories that we discussed. One is superimposition theory, and here like Brahman gets superimposed on the body, and that's why the properties of body, I am Brahman, and I get superimposed on this body whose attributes are being limited, temporary, decaying, and perishing. So, with this superimposition theory, I feel that these are my properties. That is, I am limited, I am temporary, I am decaying, I am perishing. So, all these constraints become my constraints. They are actually all these attributes are of the body. The second theory we discussed, theory of identification. So Brahman, after this superimposition, gets identified with the mind, and the mind being like while transacting in this world experiences all kinds of positive and negative emotions. And primarily, like we can take the example of negative emotions. It is going through some fear, it is going through sorrow, it is going through anxiety, and this is about mind, which is not me. But by identifying with this mind, I feel that I am fearful, I am sorrow, I experience anxiety. And this body and mind together, they generate the feelings of being incomplete and unfulfilled. And I, by this theory of superimposition, feels all the constraints. By identifying with the mind, I feel that I am incomplete, I am unfulfilled, and keep running after the worldly objects. Okay, so now let us try to compare this with the movie. Okay, so this is what is power of identification. Like as I said, there is a movie hall, and most important prerequisite for watching a movie is darkness. So with this darkness and with play of lights, man is able to create a make-believe world and makes the man forget his real identity, his real life. And if we take an example, like suppose Mukesh Ambani decides to watch a movie, and he would have a home theater in his house, and it creates this ambience or environment of a movie theater, basically pitch darkness and play of light. And what are the attributes of Mukesh Ambani? In this world, he is the wealthy, powerful, and very famous person. But when he enters the movie theater, like in his house itself, and when there is darkness and display of light and sound starts, he forget himself and he gets identified with the movie character. And let us assume that the movie being played is Dawn, maybe Dawn 1 or Dawn 2, whichever. And in this movie, the hero is named Vijay, and we all know that he is a fugitive. He has a in childhood he is poor, then he turns criminal and fugitive and always on the run and always fearful of police. So what happens when Ambani is watching this movie, he gets identified with this hero Vijay, and a fictitious entity is born because Mukesh Ambani, while watching this movie, goes through all these emotions of being fearful, being a criminal, and on the run. In real life, Mukesh Ambani can never have experienced those feelings. But by getting identified with this character in the movie, this man's make believe world can make Mukesh Ambani go through this all these negative emotions. So what happens? A fictitious entity comes up which is in the mind of Mukesh Ambani, which experiences the events and happenings of this hero in the movie, and Mukesh Ambani experiences, I would say not Mukesh Ambani, this fictitious entity which sits in the mind of Mukesh Ambani goes through all these kind of negative emotions. So there is this fictitious entity, and it has to be fictitious because it has nothing to do with the real attributes of Mukesh Ambani. And character in the movie is also fictitious because it is created by the play of light and sound, and by identifying with this entity, Mukesh Ambani no longer is Mukesh Ambani. There is this fictitious character, and he goes through all these experiences and emotions of life. So in this is man's make-believe world. So God has created a make-believe world of its own, and that's why it is also called Bhagwan's Leela. And what happens here? My reality is, my true nature is Brahman, which is Sat Chit Ananda. But by being identified with this body, mind, and intellect, a fictitious character we also called is Jiva or ego is born, and this fictitious entity, while transacting in this world, experiences all kinds of negative emotions, anxiousness, fear, anxiety, and also by identifying with this body, mind, and intellect, it experiences all kinds of emotions, and it feels that it is a bechara guy, whereas in fact it is Satchit Ananda, infinite, eternal, all powerful being. But by this wrong identification, this this Satchit Ananda Brahman gets degraded to a Bechara, limited and fearful Jiva and or ego. So this is the process as to how this Jiva or ego comes into the being. In a movie theater, it happens because of darkness, and the darkness here signifies ignorance. Okay, and this is the problem and the causes. As when the movie is just 2 hours movie, that identification is only for 2 hours. But suppose like Mukesh Ambani somehow forgets his identity and gets totally identified with this movie theater, we can say permanently, then what happens? It becomes a tragedy. While watching the movie, we enjoy the movie, and Mukesh Ambani also enjoys, even though knowing that because he knows that it is a movie. But if he forgets his identity forever and identifies with that fictitious character, it will turn out into a tragedy. And same happens to us, and that is the tragedy of our life. I am Satchit Ananda, infinite, eternal, and I am happiness myself. But because of this wrong identification, I experience all kinds of sorrows of this world. I experience finitude. I feel all kinds of constraints. I feel I am unfulfilled. So all the time I am trying to become fulfilled by undertaking actions and get deeper into the bondage. And all this happens, first of all, because of ignorance. I have forgotten who am I, and that and the second is, once I forget who am I get identified with a wrong entity, and that is the cause of all my sorrow. And that is what is the that is how the ego comes into being. And the darkness in the movie theater is similar to the ignorance that we have about ourselves. So ignorance is the root cause, and then the next one is the wrong identification. So this is how ego comes into being. And what is the solution to this? Since we have used the analogy of movie, we will see like what is the solution to this in a movie example, and then we will know what is the solution for this in real life as well. So temporary solution is disidentification, because first is I don't know who am I, and that's why I get associated with the wrong entity. So if I disidentify with the wrong entity, that would be the first step. And in while watching the movie, if we become uncomfortable, because suppose we are watching a horror movie and we become uncomfortable, and it is really unbearable for us to watch the movie, what we have to do, we for some time, like, we have to identify with that character. So what we can do, we can take out the mobile and see WhatsApp and all that, and for a some time, like, we get disidentified, and then that once that disidentification breaks, maybe only temporarily, we get relieved of all our emotions. So that is how we can do it in a movie theater. And in real life, what we can do is, when we are going through strong emotions and these emotions are actually tormenting us, what we can do is, we can stand apart from that mind and start observing our thoughts. So we can create a awareness that I am different from the mind. All these emotions are going on in the mind, which I am different. So these emotions are the play of mind, and I am apart from this. We may, like in movie, it is very easy to do this, but in real life, it will be very difficult. We will be able to do only for a very short period of time, and then the mind will get us into that whirlwind of thoughts. So that is only a temporary solution. And now when we are talking about permanent solution, what is the permanent solution in the movie? Like we discussed in an earlier session, I think, if we are watching this movie with a small child and we are watching a horror movie, and the child gets, and children usually get very strongly identified, so he gets strongly identified with the movie character, and the movie is a horror movie, so the child gets tormented, and we want the child to get rid of this emotion. So what we have to do, if we are watching it in the movie in the house itself, we just have to switch on the light, and child instantly knows the reality that he's sitting in the comforts of his house, and whatever is going on is on the TV. It is not like I am going through those incidences. Okay, so in movie, the permanent solution is switching on the light. Similarly, the permanent solution in our life also, like, this ego makes us go through all these negative emotions. So if we have to destroy this ego, what we have to do is, we have to inquire into this ego and get the self knowledge. Once we realize our own true nature, we are no longer identified with this ego, because ego itself is destroyed, and that is the permanent solution as far as our life is concerned. Okay, and what is the benefits? This is again a sentence in Vedanta. It says praptasya prapti, nivrittasya nivritti. So what happens when we realize our own true nature? It is praptasya prapti, which means you will gain what you already have. Like, I am this Satchit Ananda Brahman, but somewhere on the down the line, I have lost this identity, so I will regain my identity. So, what it says is, you will gain what you already have. I am already a Brahman, it only needs to be realized. And you will lose what was never there. What was never there? The jiva or ego was never there. It was only a fictitious entity, it was only a thought. So, on self realization, you will lose that ego which you were never there in the first place. So, the entity which is the jiva or the ego, which undergoes all kinds of problems in this world and suffers, that entity itself is dissolved, and I experience that I am not limited, I have no constraint, I am infinite, eternal, I am fulfilled. And once I realize that I don't have to depend on this world for my happiness, I don't have to undertake any actions. So since there are no actions, there is no karma phala, there is no birth again, and I get freed from the bondage of this world. Okay, and how do we do this? That's where the summary comes. Like, the problems of the mind are three. We keep discussing. I am just revising again. Like, the first problem is mala, which is unfulfilled desires. And if we have to clean this, the way to do is karma yoga. And this is explained in verses 1 to 3 of Upadesha Saar. And the other problem of the mind is agitations. It is not able to focus at all. So it will find it difficult to grasp this very subtle knowledge of Brahman. So we need to quieten the mind, and this is given in verse number 4 to 10. I also needs to tune my body and the mind, and this is done through Ashtanga Yoga, which is verses 11 to 12. And then, like, what remains is the ignorance. Like, the mind is purified, but I still have ignorance about my own true nature. And if ignorance is the problem, the only solution is knowledge. Ignorance is about the self, so solution is also the self knowledge. And in verses 13 to 16, we discussed about the Shravana Manana Nididasana. And from verse numbers, like, Ramana Maharshi uses a different method, which is the method of inquiry, which we have discussed from verse number 7 to 20. So this is how the ego comes into being, and this is the entire process. And if we have to, like, know who we are, we have to destroy this ego, and that's what we have discussed so far. Okay, so with this, we have come to the end of this session. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Raj. Very nice it was.
The movie example was made it very clear.
Yeah, yeah. With the movie example, it is easy to understand, like, what really happens.
That crystal and that cloth, I think it's called as that superimposition is called adhyasa, na?
No, I am not aware.
I think
I don't know this term.
I've heard that word also.
Okay.
Adhyasa it is. And not only movie, even serial, those who are watching regularly.
Everything,
Even
whatever
with the
is
light, even
man's
with the
make
lights
believe
on,
world.
they get carried away with the character.
Yes, yes. So we don't realize, but We are like watching a movie even now. Okay. We think it's real. Okay, any questions, any comments? Otherwise, we will conclude today's session. Okay, yeah. So, Purnam Om Purnamada Purnamida Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.
Yo.
Hari Om, Auntie.
Thank you, Virajji.
Thank you.
Hari Om, thank you so much.
Thank you, Virajita. Hari Om.
Yeah.